Good afternoon, Martin. Episode 60, Illuminating Rounds. Welcome. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Fresh into the new year now. We are kicking back. New Year's resolutions, have you kept any? Have you stuck to any?
I decided that I was going to get some Velcro put up on the walls in the house because this year I want to stick to it. Sorry, best I could do.
It wasn't even rehearsed, was it? It's very good. Very good. Wow, okay, you're coming in. You started strong. It's a strong start.
Anything for you?
I just before New Year, I picked up a Peloton bike, and I am not literally picking it up because they're very heavy, but I am doing my best to do Peloton cycling. So if there are other Peloton cyclists out there, they can follow me. Not literally, because we'll never get anywhere on our bikes.
No.
But yeah, very good. Very expensive, but very good workouts. They're very motivating. They're very good people to kind of cheer you on and get you cycling. So I want to try and get back to fighting weight, which is probably about 2 stone off for me. So it's quite a lot of stone. Nobody knows that outside of the UK what that means. So could mean 50 grams. Let's pretend. But
it's for viewers abroad. It's about a leg and a half, isn't it?
It certainly is. Yeah, I could just do this, just 3 legs less. I'll be fine. So first of all, thank you to all our patrons. We appreciate you sticking by. One of the great benefits of being a patron is you get invited to our yearly tournament. So this year we are going to kick that off. We're going to get Ian hopefully to create us another diorama. So if you would like to be a part of that, drop me an email at aslscenarioarchive@gmail.com. We'll take entries through to about, let's say, the middle of February, and then we'll close then, and we'll get the scenarios selected and everything. Same as always, everybody will play the same scenario. We will run through it then as part of one of our episodes, and we'll run through the scenarios. I've got an idea who might be able to run these tournaments better than I can run them, so I'm going to keep that under my hat, but stay tuned. We might get a good tournament organizer to help us out with these kind of things.
That would totally change the tournament, wouldn't it, really?
I wasn't sure, but it would change the effort levels I have to go to, because I am struggling. So one thing is, so if you haven't let me know about the Play by Mail tournament, let me know how people have got on in that. We've got about 8 results in, so not as many as I think has happened, and it may be that I've missed them or whatever. So I am going to post up now on the screen what I think are the current results that I've seen. So if you're not on there, or if you've played a game that you don't see on there, let me know. I don't doubt it's my mistake, not your mistake, but just let me know if you've seen them. But anyway, you can see now roughly where people are in terms of the tournament. You're doing quite well, Martin. You've won a couple and lost one.
That's correct. Yeah, one more to go.
In with a shout.
Yeah, one undecided. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll see how that goes. But for the main tournament, which is obviously not play by mail, unless both people agree to it, but by default it won't be play by mail. It's by vassal if possible. We're going to start that around about the mid-February. So let us know if you'd like to be part of it. Patreons, you have to be in the middle tier or above to be in with a shout. But if there are not enough patrons to do at least like an even number of the tournament, we'll drop it down to the lower level of patrons to fill up those spaces. So, and it'll be first come first serve to whatever it will be, 16 places or something like that. So that's that. Martin, you've got a good story to tell us about ASL.
Yeah. So Indy, who's one of the watches this sometimes, occasionally.
He's a friend of the show.
Very good friend of ours indeed. Yeah, both of us. We've known him for perhaps 10 years. Before the pandemic, he would come over once or twice a year to tournaments. No, Indy really, really well. Would see him once or twice a year. He stayed at my house. I think he's stayed at yours, or he's talking about possibly staying at yours at some point. So very, very close friend. And this year, now, bearing in mind, he lives in Calgary in Canada, on another continent, thousands of miles away from here, on this huge planet that we inhabit. And last academic year, there was this Canadian guy teaching at my school, a guy called Dawson. I didn't get to know him that well, but we had a few chats here and there around the school. I even offered him like my spare room, could sort of rent out the spare room because it's very near the school and I knew he was commuting a long way. He didn't take me up on the offer, but, I kind of knew him a little bit. He went back to Canada and he was walking down the road in his home city and he sees his old maths lecturer sat down having a beer with some friends in a bar. So he goes in to say, "Hey, Indy," my old maths lecturer, I just spent a year in England, a little town called Haverhill. No one's ever heard of it. And Indy, not only has he heard of it and stayed in Haverhill, he says, "Oh, you probably know Martin Parker there." And this guy apparently was absolutely floored. I've been in touch with him. He said he literally couldn't speak for absolute shock. Like, who doesn't Indy know if he knows this guy on the other side of the world coming? And it even occurred to me that it would have been more crazy had he taken me up on the offer of a spare room. They'd have actually slept in the same bed. How remarkable. Not at the same time.
And just to be clear, not your bed as well.
No. The spare bed. How remarkable.
It's a small world.
But it isn't.
No,
that's what you say, isn't it? That's what you say. Yeah, but it's not small at all.
No, crazy. Oh, well, that's a good story. And it's similar to the joke that I saw Indy comment on. It's an old joke about, the guy that everybody knows this guy, and he's, it goes on and on and on about how this guy knows everybody. And the punchline is that he goes and sees the Pope, and the security guard on the ground can't believe it. And he's like, "What the hell's going on?" And the guy's like, "I know, it's crazy." He goes, "Who's that up next to Dave on the balcony?" It's a little bit like that with you there, Martin, on the the Haverhill.
Yeah, I think it slightly reminds me of a different story, which is a true story, and it's this Frank Sinatra told this story, and when he was like one of almost the most famous man on earth. He's in New York. You know this story?
Tell it, yeah, it's good.
And he's just sat there having a chat with someone, and a guy comes up to him and says, "Look, hey Frank, I'm on this hot date with this girl. She's going on great. I've lied to her. I've told her I know you. Would you mind just saying hello on your way past?" And he goes, "Yeah, all right, I don't mind." And on his way past, he tells him his name. His name's Dave or Samantha or whatever it is. So on his way back, he goes, "Oh, hi, Dave. Nice to see you." And he goes, "Hey, do you mind? Frank, clear off. Do you see I'm on a date here?" I thought that was a good story.
It's very good. Excellent. All right. Okay. None of that's got anything to do with ASL, but that's all right. Well,
Indy is an ASL player. That was relevant.
It's tenuous, but it's worth
cut the rest. You can cut the rest of it.
It's staying. Of course, it's staying. We started a conversation, and it was a comment on YouTube as well about different types of players that you either are or you meet. And what the kind of environment is for the different types of players around the world. So you and I, we're more than casual players, aren't we? I mean, we play, almost once a week, and we go to tournaments, but we're not serious players. So I guess, how would you describe you as a player? If because I think to the outside world, we're very committed players. Like if you tell your mum you're going to a tournament in Blackpool, that's a big deal, isn't it? How do you describe yourself to other ASL players, and then what about to the rest of the world?
So I suppose the thing with me is that I'm relatively committed, and I play, you once a week, and I sometimes play other people as well. So I say it's quite a high level of commitment, but I tend not to do a lot in the way of preparation. There are rules which are kind of like slightly unclear in my head, and if I was a bit more serious, I would sit down and I would get that right in my head. I get it absolutely clear, and I don't do it. Year after year, me and you'll suddenly go, "Oh, do you know what happens when the smoke drifts? What is that?" Whatever. And so I think the thing is, I don't commit that time in the background to it. I sometimes enjoy preparing for a game. I mean, it's not that I don't do it. I will sort of set up a defence or something and perhaps take some time and think about it. But I don't. I think that's the thing. It's the time in the background that I don't put in. I like to play it, but I kind of quite like coming home from work and somebody going, "Do you fancy a game of ASL?" And we just set the counters up and start moving things around. I guess I just enjoy doing it. No, that's never happened. It's never happened.
I mean, the fact that someone's in your house might be a little bit perturbing.
It will be on Vassal, but it sort of happens. I finished work today. I didn't know for sure what we were doing. You know, it's
no, that's true. Yeah, no one's sat in the house waiting to play.
No.
When you tell other people about ASL and your hobby of ASL, what do you tell them? And without being too defensive about it or whatever, but what do you tell them in terms of that you are a regular player or that you play? It's your number one hobby. What do you say?
I think I tell them that it's my main hobby, I suppose. I don't know what I tell them. I try not to tell people much about it, if I'm honest with you. I mean, I think everybody I know knows that I play, but they've got no idea what it is.
Yeah.
I've even sort of left it out as a sort of talking point, and people just ignore it, put their coffee on the boards or something like that. So,
I told that story before about the only time ever in the world of my history of travelling, there was quite a pretty girl next to me, and she turned around. I was on the way to Ohio to play ASL.
This is the only time you've been on an airplane next to a pretty girl you weren't in a relationship with.
That's thank you. That's just
getting you out of trouble there.
It's very true. But someone who I didn't know who just started talking to me, and so she happened to say, "Oh, where are you off to?" And my heart sunk when I had to tell her, like, I'm off to play a ball game that I'm not very good at. She thought I was like some champion of Britain going to play some tournament, and I mean, no, I was just off for a.
That's almost a dream, isn't it? Particularly for like a single guy, is like, you sit next to a pretty girl and just absolutely fascinated that you're into this hobby. Like, what? Well, you got little squads that move around. That sounds really good.
It's not going to happen.
No.
So, I mean, because there are arrangements. So we obviously play quite a lot, but I think we are casual players. I mean, I know it sounds crazy to.
I agree with that.
We've got thousands of pounds worth of kit, and we play ASL almost to the detriment of every other board game. I mean, I very rarely play other board games these days, and yet we are casual players. There are other players who play a lot less. I mean, I've heard of players that play once or twice a year, and that's literally it. They do you fancy a game of ASL? Fine, we'll get the rules out again. Probably play some, kind of reduced version. Starter kit kind of perhaps is more more applicable or more appealing for that level of player. But that's just as valid, obviously. Just as there's no question about them being better or worse for the hobby or anything like that. But then there are the very dedicated players who will study ASL and will, like the Tobys, who will study a defence and won't really want to play if he hasn't at least had a passing glimpse at the scenario, wants to give it his best. And that kind of leads on to a conversation I was going to have with you about how ASL is very cruel sometimes at where you put your best effort in and you don't necessarily get your best result out through the dice or through opponents outplaying you or through the scenario being a bit tough or misreading a victory condition or whatever it might be. There's all those kind of things. So how suitable is it for a game of like really deep study, and that, like, certainly I've in my my relatively recent time, I've kind of put a little bit more onus on, okay, well, I'm going to try and do a little bit better ASL. And it's worse, I find, when you don't do so well, because I sometimes it doesn't reward you. And we've had situations in the game that we'll talk about this time. Sometimes you make a mistake, I capitalise on that mistake, and I get not punished for it. It's too, and vice versa as well. I mean, there's no question. But sometimes, for example, there's times where I've done it as well. You run a squad into a open ground, you take the down 2 shot, you pass with a snake eyes, up comes a hero. That hero is going to wreak havoc.
I can't imagine that ever really happening in a real game, Dave.
You can't say that with a straight face. But and the trouble is with that is that we've talked about this. I felt a bit like kind of frustrated sometimes with ASL because unlike chess, where it's very, very, the kind of the study you put in, you generally get the rewards come back out again. ASL sometimes feels like that doesn't happen, and I know that's whining. I know that if you look at the bigger picture, it will do, and it's just local maxima or minima of dice rolls. So, what do you think in terms of how good ASL is for the idea of studying to become better, and the idea of it returning what you put in? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the first thing I think is that the way in which the dice and circumstances like that can like foil even the best of plans is oddly, I think, it's a part of the strength of the game. It's sort of what distinguishes it from something like chess, where you got the rules play out exactly how you would predict, if you like. But because it gives it's that sort of dramatic element to the game, isn't there? So it's not particularly, literally your front line can go berserk, can't it, and charge the enemy, and it might spoil the game in terms of it being an equal match, perhaps. But that kind of creates a lot of suspense.
Yeah,
it creates a lot of drama, especially when you see like new guys. Sorry about that. You hear new guys talking. They go, "Oh yeah, we had this happen, and then this happened." It's all stuff that's happened to us before, but it's kind of quite exciting. It's a real strength to it. In terms of like how much your effort is rewarded, I think there's so much depth to the game that a little bit of study perhaps wouldn't make a huge difference, but it's incredibly deep, isn't it? So, we've played for a long time, and we relatively like middle of the road, reasonably good players, perhaps. But then someone like Toby is so much better than us still. I mean, we could work close and get closer to his ability, couldn't we? Whether we'd ever be as good or not is another question. Right. But you could work really hard, and you would incrementally get better. So I think it pays you back very, very cleverly by just paying you a tiny bit back. Lots of work, you get a little bit better.
Right.
I think that's quite good, actually.
Yeah. I find sometimes like you can win or lose a game through the knowledge of one dice modifier towards the end, or whatever, it's always going to be the critical one towards the end, whatever it is. Mm. But remembering whatever it is, ambush gives you a +1 if you're buttoned up in a vehicle, and +2 in a vehicle, and things like that. Little things like that, if you forget those, and just constantly remembering little rules that will get you out of trouble. So, for example, if your tank rolls up and shoots at me with machine guns, then starts off again and stops another hex and goes to fire at me with your tank, and then me remembering, because I'd forgotten for years, and it was a tip in one of the dispatches from the bunkers, tanks can't fire in 2 different hexes as it moves, unless it keeps right fire. Things like that will get you out of trouble. So sometimes those rules are like little escape hatches that you've got to remember, and if you don't remember that, you are, you're in trouble. And things like remembering heroes are stealthy or whatever it is for the ambush rolls.
And it's a game of nuance, isn't it? So all of those vehicles have like tiny differences between them, tiny strengths, and learning how to sort of play those with the rules and take advantage of those. And sometimes I can't see how to take advantage of it, but I think it's perhaps because I'm not as good a player. But then I'll play Toby, and he's got these vehicles doing all kinds of stuff that would never have occurred to me. So it's so I think there's you can, you do improve. It's not a straight line. It's much more complex than that.
And every time you and I play, technically, you and I get a little bit better. I mean, just a tiny fraction better. But we will get a little bit better. And the trouble is, as we do, we generally play each other. We don't necessarily see that difference. And it's, if, for example, you are 5% a better player than me right now, tomorrow you'll be a 6% better, but I'll have caught one up, so I'll still be, I know percentages don't quite like that, but if we keep incrementing the same, it's very hard to overtake someone who is better than you if you just play that one person. So it always goes back to play more people and.
Do you think that you tend to equalise with your like regular opponent? Like you're swimming in the same ocean, aren't you, all the time, basically, and you learn to like defend yourself against them. You learn to match their abilities. I don't know.
If you're both only playing each other, then I think if someone is playing 2 good players, and these 2 players are only playing the one person, I would think that it's possible for that person to succeed potentially both of those players. Almost, it's almost like playing, like when you play a grandmaster against a grandmaster in a simultaneous view, David Blaine did. But that kind of idea of doing a simultaneous, you can kind of do that, but it's hard then to see you usurping both. But technically, if you bring the best of both those players' skills together, they're better than the sum of the parts. They're greater than each individual player. So technically, I suppose it would be easier. However, like I say, because we're just playing each other, it's quite difficult for us to do that, and it's also quite difficult to recognise that as well. you and I, let's say, I think, last 20 games, I think you're still at the edge. If we carry on improving in the same rate and we don't play anybody else extra, there's no reason why you wouldn't stay, let's say, 60-40 above me right now. And that's tough because it's very hard. I think Indy went through something similar. We said about, his regular opponent, he lost, I think it was 60-70% of the games he played last year. And it's tough because you can never quite get up to that level because unless you're playing other players. And I think my last point here is that sometimes it's a cruel game because you put a lot of effort in to the detriment of other things going on in your life. You could spend more time with your family, you could spend whatever. And losing a 6-hour scenario after you have studied it and after you have decided, okay, I'm going to do better at this. I'm going to absolutely remember my circling fire shots. I'm going to remember my failure to routes. I'm going to remember all these things. I'm going to fall back rather than push forward on the attack. I'm going to fall back and do everything properly. And then you lose and you're like, that's pretty harsh. It's a pretty, it's cruel like that. It's a cruel game.
But then winning and losing is obviously so binary, isn't it? I mean, it might well be you remembered all of those things, and like there's lots of wins in a scenario. You captured that building, you nearly got that one, and all that kind of drama. So I think, but the way the game is, there has to be a winner, and it does feel quite cruel sometimes. But the other thing is, of course, if the alternative is for it not to be that challenging. If you know that you can spend a couple of hours studying, give your best game and guarantee winning, well, there'd be no excitement in that, would there?
Yeah.
It's no difference to football, is it? A good football match. These people train like crazy, don't they? In professional football. Actually, it's an interesting comparison because, of course, you've got people who do Sunday league football or whatever and probably don't train at all, just go out on Sunday and have a knockabout and see how they do. Some of those people are probably quite aggressively competitive and some of them are just out for a bit of fun. It's a very similar, quite a good analogy, actually.
Do you like it? Okay. So where do you think you are? If, for example, you are potentially, let's say your peak is 100% of whatever your peak is. That's your peak. Where are you on that level? And have you reached your peak, or are you still progressing towards the peak?
I don't know, because if you think of this as like a graph, I've been like that.
Yeah.
Like all the years, I think, really. Probably maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, slightly just sort of going up. I don't think I'm probably the best I've ever been even now. I remember we used to play quite a lot years ago, probably like 10 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And I used to play some people who you might consider like quite good players at the time.
Dave Schofield, I know you played quite a lot of.
Dave Schofield, I played a lot, and Tim. I beat Tim once, and he said,
"Still talking about it."
He said, "You will never beat me again." And it wasn't long after that he gave up ASL, which is interesting.
Is that right? Has he given up?
I don't think he plays now. In fact, the last time I spoke to him, which was some time ago, he said, look, if you want to come down, we'll go for a drink and a curry and, stay over, whatever, but I won't want to play ASL.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and he doesn't go to tournaments for years.
He was right then. You never did beat him again.
No, but we did play a few games after that. He thrashed me out. Yeah. So, I don't know. I think maybe I like to think my strongest point is in the future.
Okay.
I'm not optimistic. I'm a glass half full kind of guy.
Okay. All right, good.
What about you, Dave? Where are you? On the way up?
I think I'm a long way below my best.
Yeah.
And I think I'm kind of like, I don't think I'm getting a lot better these days. I think there's the age question as well, isn't it? There is this kind of idea that, we get a bit older and things are a little bit tougher. So yeah, I don't know. I don't see.
I don't feel like I'm at my best. But the thing is, I think you would have to work at it. You'd have to go, right, I want to be a better player. I'm going to work at it. Yeah.
And I'm definitely in this frame of mind at the moment where, we talk about there's this idea of unconscious incompetence, and it goes to conscious incompetence, and then unconscious incompetence and conscious competence or something. There's the four things.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely at this phase now where I am very conscious of my incompetence. And so I don't know if that's the second or third one up, but
well, aren't they like quadrants?
I think you have a progression upwards. So they always talk about driving, where you're unconsciously incompetent.
Yeah.
And then you're consciously incompetent, and then you're consciously incompetent.
I get the idea.
Yeah. Anyway, but what technically right now, I'm observing a lot of my mistakes, and I'm as I'm playing, I'm feeling like, oh, that's the wrong thing to do.
Me too. Yeah.
So maybe there's, we're not at the level of unconscious incompetence, which we know is the first wrong. So there's that, and we'll talk about that in the game coming up. I think that's one of the things. We're going to talk about game rooms at some point. We'll probably leave that till next time. But we're interested in people's ideas of game rooms. What should a good game room have? And you've got some photos that someone sent you.
It'd be nice if anyone listening now who's got a games room would send them in. And I know this varies from, people have like a fold away table that they get out and put out. Sometimes I've played on such things in people, places. So, but all the way to having like a whole floor dedicated to your wargaming or whatever. Nice. So send pictures in or comments, and we'll try and do a feature next time on people's games rooms.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. And I'd like some ideas as well. I'm kind of keep idly thinking. I've got a lot of time on my hands these days. I keep idly thinking about taking my whole study off and maybe even knocking through. I've got a room next door to this room, and maybe knocking through and just making a big.
That would make sense, actually. Yeah,
make a big room. The reason why I don't do it is 'cause I've got two doors. This door and the door that way that goes into the room next door, off the hallway, and I don't know what to do about making that one room or one doorway, and I just give up. I stop thinking about it. But I do often think that'd be nice to have a nice games room, nice glass cupboard with all my box art, and start to display some of that box art as well. So so send us some ideas and some thoughts about games and their cupboards and spaces,
and get featured next week. I'm going to turn the notifications off on my phone.
Okay. Ever the professional.
Sorry, Ariel.
Yeah, that's fine. Right, we played this last week. We played face-to-face game. We played Unlucky 13th. I went to report this on the Scenario Archive. I noticed I'd played it 3 times before. I'd never remembered it at all.
Wow, not against me.
Twice against you.
You're joking.
Twice.
I have literally no memory of this.
No, nor have I. 2011 and 2010 we played it. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And the other person I played against this was Chris Walton, who we remember from the tournaments, the UK tournaments. Lives on a houseboat, or did live on a houseboat.
He certainly did do, yeah. I mean, I'm still Facebook friends with Chris. He occasionally comments. He's been all around the world.
Has he?
He has an interesting life, yeah.
On his houseboat?
I'd be very surprised if a British narrowboat has gone to Nepal like the way that Chris has.
He's trekking it. He's putting it on his back.
Tibet. He's been everywhere. It's a fascinating life. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So let's talk about Unlucky 13th. So here's the board in front of us. So do you remember anything about the scenario, Martin? Do you remember? I only have the British.
I do remember it, but only from the last time that we played about a week ago.
Okay.
Absolutely dumbfounded that I've played this game before.
So the British have about 3 squads in total. Germans have, is it about 6, I think, to start with, 5 or 6 coming on with. Yeah,
and the 2 tanks, yeah.
That's right, yeah. And the British also have the use of an immobilised French S-35. And the deal is that the S-35 can basically set up one of 2 hexes in front of the bridges, and the bridge that it sets up across is designated as a footbridge. So there is a bit of a question about where to set up the tank. The idea is the Germans have to capture all of the buildings below or to the south of the canal, and the British have reinforcements of 6 carriers coming on. I think it's 4 carrier A's and 2 carrier C's. I think the ATRs. And you get another 6 squads coming on as well. And there is a little bit of a guessing game as to where you're going to bring them on. You're bringing them on from one of the 2 sides of the map, and the British carriers are going to come on from towards the bottom of the map. And so there might be an ambush kind of possible.
And we had to decide that, both of us had to decide where we would bring them on before the game, before we saw a setup, etc.
That's right, yeah. So my setup here was, I was expecting you. So I put the tank over here. I'm going to actually do some drawing on the map here. I put the tank over here. So yeah, you're saying that. No, you can't see it, but rather than in the hex with the wire here,
Yeah.
predominantly because I thought if the hex with the wire has shots where you can get side shots from your first prep
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah.
So these hexes here being fairly easy to kind of attack the tank
Yeah.
as a side. So knowing that you would probably avoid the tank, and you did, I thought that the next thing you would do is assume that the gun was sitting somewhere in this hex here. This is the hex right opposite the bridge. And so I assumed that you would do a lot of firing from there. So the next thing I thought, I tried to double my cleverness, was that I would make these as dummies. So these guys here are dummies. And the plan is that you're going to spend your whole prep fire shooting at these dummies. You're not going to get very far. You're not going to reveal the gun. You're going to waste a turn, and then you're going to come across. And my gun that is actually here in
K4.
K4, thank you. He's going to be kind of guarding the bridge. That was my thoughts. What did you think of my setup, Martin?
So obviously I didn't know where the gun was, but I assumed it would be somewhere on the bridge that I was most likely to go across. I thought, I'm not going to go across the footbridge, am I? It's going to be, you got the tank covering it, so I can't flank tank to fire at it. So I thought, you got the wire there and everything, that makes it quite difficult for me to cross. I did think that I don't know what is dummies and what isn't. I didn't assume there was anything in J. Is it J3? Is it?
Yeah, J.
Yeah. I didn't assume there was anything there. I thought there might be, but I didn't know.
Right.
But I decided that I would just go across the bridge.
And so this was my first mistake, because I suddenly realised, I know what wire is. So wire, we call it a false multiplier. It multiplies the defensive value because you're going to get stuck on that, and I'll get to have lots of shots at you as you are struggling on that wire, and you're going to be shooting at me with +1s, and I get the whatever. So of course, as the game plays out, you are stuck on that wire. Almost every one of your squads gets stuck on that wire. It's going to be a bit of a pain for you, and I have very, very little to shoot at you from that. I mean, it's there is some capability to bring these guys here across back to down the building line. But I did feel like I missed the trick, really, in so much as I could have had more firepower there. So okay, that was that. So at the end of turn one, what happened? Well, we had your tank rolled across to try and get rid of the wire. That was the plan. You skirted around. Now I think you made a mistake here, because you got your tank onto the wire, which obviously was the right thing to do. And then you decided you would turn on the wire to try and remove it, which is absolutely fine. Very little chance of bogging, good chance of succeeding to remove it. But you turned away from my gun. You obviously didn't know my gun was there, but you kind of gave me a side shot on the gun, which was probably the more. I don't know if you did that deliberately because you thought that the gun was going to be in one of the hexes down here, lower down, so you wanted to keep the front to these ones. But I got the side shot, and I can't remember if I hit. Was it a double one? I can't remember if it was a critical or whatever. But I
can't remember now. Yeah,
I think it was obviously low enough. I got a burning wreck.
Yeah. I suppose I did. Obviously, I didn't know where the gun was, and I didn't really take a view about where the gun would be. I didn't know where it was. I assumed it could probably see that hex, and I just thought, well, I'll turn. I need to turn anyway, but turning gives me another chance of removing the wire. And as it happens, I'm kind of quite pleased with the smoke there. I mean, if you're going to lose a tank, that's the place for it to go up in smoke.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. And so you didn't take any prep fire shots at all. You just come straight running across the thing. There was, I think, you opportunity fired.
I opportunity fired. Yeah, there's the group with the -1 leader, isn't there?
Yeah. These guys.
There's two groups. There's two groups.
Yeah, you did. You opportunity fired with both of them. And didn't get a lot of results out from that. Okay, so that was turn one. By turn two, you were a bit unlucky with your tank. It broke its coaxial machine gun, and I had started to bring down my troops
Under
down.
Sergeant Barker.
Yeah, Sergeant Barker is sitting in here. We know Sergeant Barker, the 8-1 leader, is in here. And here's the kind of the first debate about whether I'm going to jump out of the tank, abandon it, and then bring the crew into the buildings here just to try and kind of guard it a little bit. So I decided to do that. I think the turn later. Your tank was quite well placed there, actually. In what is that? 03.
Yeah.
Because it's got some good covering of these hexes here. My anti-tank rifle is pretty poorly placed, and you broke a squad that's now starting to retreat back. And obviously, you're going to get your reinforcements are going to come in on the next turn as well. So you're starting to come across the bridge. It wasn't dreadful. And again, I don't have a lot to stop you really at this point. Did you expect me to jump out of the tank? Is that something? Because obviously I could stay in it and protect.
No, it hadn't occurred to me that you would jump out of the tank.
Right.
But it's an obvious way of like having another unit, isn't it? Hanging onto a building. Having said that, maybe it would have been. It could have been useful even where it. Of course, it's immobile; it can't move. But even there, it can cover the last building a little bit. Some of the approaches to it, can't it?
Yeah. And the thing is, because the British have the last turn, there is always the opportunity to abandon the tank and then jump in as an advanced phase to grab a building back again in the last phase. So it's not terrible.
Yeah.
Okay, so you brought your infantry on the left-hand side. You had the option of right or left, and you bring it on the left-hand side, which is reasonable. And straight away you're going to capture my guys who don't rally back again, and my anti-tank rifle squad is looking quite trapped here. This was the interesting story here, the Sergeant Barker debacle, as I'll call it. So this was a place where you got yourself into this hex here with the DM squad, and I'd had the 12-up-1, and I had broken your squad. I had pinned your leader.
Yeah.
And for final fire, I was thinking, okay, well, a 6-up-1, I'm just going to get rid of these guys because they are going to start to route. They can start to route back across the bridge. And what you would tend to do was just low crawling under the smoke, and I couldn't really stop you. So I thought, you know what? And I think I rolled a 3. I did great. Very happy with myself. I was very smug. And you rolled a 1-1, and you rallied the squad. So the leader passed the morale check, and the squad rallied, and you got a hero out of it. And this is where my personal morale kind of faltered a little bit, and I was thinking, I can see what's going to happen here. You're gonna jump in, and I kind of got a bit frustrated. I was like, this is it's just crazy. So then the debate is for my next turn was whether or not to jump into close combat or to avoid you. And I think what happened here was I go into close combat with your guys. In fact, actually, you jump into close combat on your turn, don't you? And in close combat, you roll a 6 and I roll a 1.
Yeah.
And so all the kind of the whining that I've done has now been rubbed out. I've now got a leader. I get a 0 leader. There was a good little memory of the check was for if you have odds less than 1-1 on the close combat dice roll.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
didn't know that. It took you. Yeah.
So I get a leader coming out of it. So the leader comes in. So now I've got Sergeant Barker. I've got my 4.57. I've got the light machine gun. I've got the gun in that hex, and I've got another leader. And things are okay. I'm thinking, okay, that's pretty good. So by the kind of the next turn here, you've got your medium machine gun has got into this building, and I have a bit of decision about whether I jump back here and kind of piggyback down towards the tank. This hex here, you've captured everybody. I think you've got two squads or a squad and a half of prisoners. We've got this melee going on here. Is it one leader in there with mine, and you've got a couple of squads in, or a squad in there.
It's just the one squad, but yeah.
I think you bring it up to 2 squads as well, don't you? I think
I certainly remember feeling like I ought to be winning it, and it just dragged on and on. There's this one guy locked in the WC or whatever, and
Right. Yeah, you couldn't
it
get him
wouldn't come out.
He wouldn't come out. So by the next turn, I have brought my carriers on, and I go into close combat with your. I think you're pinned. So you have a pinned in this hex here. You have a pinned squad and a hero that's been generated as you've run across the open ground on turn 2.
Yeah.
I think this is what we talked about.
Yeah.
They fire at you because you were being really careful. You had run all the way down this kind of like hex line here, checking to make sure there were no line of sights across here, and then you ended up in this hex here, and there's a beautiful straight down the line.
The madness is that I intended to stop a hex before that. And then I thought, I still got so I worked out where I was going to end. And then when I've got another movement factor, I might as well move them. And that was the crazy thing.
Yeah, that's where you generate your hero.
Yes, right. Yeah.
So
my second hero.
That's right.
Yeah.
So in the close combat here, I have to decide whether or not I'm going to start to pull back. And this is where I talked about my conscious incompetence, and I talked about this a little bit with you and Indy last week. I think at this point in the game, I get lazy and I think I can win the game outright here. If I jump in here, win the close combat, the carriers can take off this hex here and can sort this out. And what's going to go wrong? Well, we know the close combat was going to go wrong. My leader, my 2 leaders in my squad, so I'm 6 against your 5, even though you're pinned. So you are, I think, 1 to 2. But you've got your hero in there as well. You roll a 4, you wipe me out, I miss you. And suddenly you've got a squad, you've got a hero, you're up against my anti-tank gun there. But my carriers are here. You can see you have got a line of sight across to one of them here. Now here's a rules question that I think we played. I don't know if we played this right. I understand encircling fire shots being that they have to be continuous shots, so you fire and then you fire again. But we had the instance where these carriers formed like an enveloping maneuver against one squad and fire all at the same time with one shot. And we weren't clear whether that's an encircling fire shot.
I in my mind, I was clear. That doesn't mean I'm right.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I was clear that it's the shot that encircles is that it counts. If that happens to be that it's just one shot, I think that's fine.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
But it would be interesting to have somebody adjudicate that for us. Yeah.
If that's correct or not. So the carriers obviously are really, really good. I mean, they can jump around and they can get to where they need to be really quickly.
They can make it very difficult to advance into buildings as well, can't they? You played that a lot in your final turn.
Exactly. So basically, as we come up towards the last turn here, and again, the British do have the last turn, so the Germans have a lot to do. I managed to this carry here is not destroyed. It was just we flipped it because it was basically scrounged and everything, or at least abandoned. And the issue here is that you can start to jump these carriers and get the guys out of them, or you can park them in hexes with buildings and make it a little bit more difficult for the troops to advance in here. And then you start the tank up and you immediately bog on the wire, and that's a problem because then you're going to mire for next turn. So although you are starting to leapfrog here and you have got rid of most of the defenders, there's going to be enough here to defend, and we have a kind of a mad last run. But
you do exactly the right thing at the end. You get that half squad into H1. He's just jumped out of that carrier, hasn't he? You do put them in bypass, just covering just make it really difficult for me to capture all of the buildings. I've got to run in different directions, and as it happens, I put one by one. I think I play all my cards to try and get into H1.
Right.
And when none of them can,
that's the one.
It's the end of the game, isn't it?
And then we should mention we got a couple of escaped prisoners here.
Yes.
There was what happened there? They died in, I can't remember if it was.
They died
failure to rout. I think from the carriers they broke. with the carriers?
Yes, that's right. So my guys died for failure to rout. They had, I think, 2 squads, or at least a squad and a half, or whatever. You lost some possibly in that morale check that they failed. I think some of the prisoners died as well. But then, of course, one rearmed.
Yep.
And the others were not. But even the unarmed ones can still occupy a building, can't they, potentially?
Right.
They can't enter a hex with Germans in, but they can enter an empty hex and occupy it and control it.
Exactly. So in the end, it looked a little bit more comfortable for the British, more because you had to kind of do a bit of a crazy dash, didn't you? So it was a good scenario. It was for our my fourth play, and I mean, not that I remember at all. It was good.
I think my biggest fail. Well, there were several things were failures, but one of my biggest failures is all those. Well, the 2 squads that ended up in sort of L0. Where the sniper counter is.
Yep.
They went off there and captured loads of prisoners and tidied up the board.
Yep.
But I hadn't quite realised how exposed they were to the carriers.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought, right, they can fall on the last buildings over near the French tank, after they've cleared up that bit of the board without realising that they were going to get cleared up themselves.
Yeah. No, I hear you. We should mention it's an Ian Daglish scenario, and it's in the Journal 4. So it's the journal that Ian had a huge personal input into. He did the big carrier article, and I mean, obviously the ASL world is a worse place without Ian, but it was very nice to be able to play an Ian scenario with reading the carrier rules. I had a nice evening just going through that lovely article from Ian, and I don't particularly like historical articles. I'm not a big fan of them, really. Knowing which unit is in which part of the world and whatever. But the carrier article is really interesting because it talks a lot about how the British adapted to the use of carriers, how what they did in the war, and how the troops actually enjoyed fighting from them a little bit more than people expect them to, and how ubiquitous they were in the war as well. I mean, they were most infantrymen had come across carriers and were brought across them using them, as opposed to tanks where they very rarely kind of come across them and stuff. So. It was good. I can see, based on my performance here, why they were so happy with them. So nice little scenario. Recommend it. Obviously, it's quite old now, and most people have, if they're going to play it, would have played it. But this came about because I was looking for my debut British counters. I wanted to have a little bit more fun with my debut ones. Good scenario.
Yeah, no, very much so. Yeah, very much so. Lots of challenges for both sides, I think.
It feels very tough for the Germans, I do think. I mean, balance-wise, it's pretty good.
It
does feel tough.
I didn't think the bridge crossing went as well as it might have done, because it was just very difficult getting into that hex with the gun facing it, and especially when you got Sergeant Parker there. Yeah. But you got the whole bridge crossing, but then you got like a flanking attack, But it's those carriers. Those carriers are a nightmare.
Yeah, having to defend against the last turn as well.
Yeah,
means that
exactly. Yeah,
because the carriers are so mobile.
They're so mobile, but they're also so versatile. The infantry can get out and they're full half squads, aren't they? They can even take a light machine gun with them or an anti-tank rifle or whatever, can't they?
Yeah.
Or they can stay in the vehicles and have the benefits of vehicles. So it's it's very difficult to know how to handle them. And the anti-tank rifles are relatively ineffective against them. You might be better off firing your IFE against them.
Yeah. Oh, good scenario. Good scenario.
Yeah.
All right. So we are going to play a live game on Twitch next Tuesday. I know we said this before, but we are going to play. So on the 18th of January, from 6 o'clock, we are going to play something. We are going to play The Bend from Action Pack 16. It's Germans against Americans. I don't know if you want to defend this time, Martins. I don't know which one's which. But
I'm happy to defend.
All right.
Yeah.
So
I think the Americans are defending.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we'll be on Twitch then for our live game. Please join us if you can. If not, we'll put the live game on YouTube afterwards for everybody to view. My internet is perfect. I'm going to say military grade. I don't know if military have good internet. I'm assuming they do. Great internet now. So there's going to be no problems with streaming uploads and bits and pieces. You're going to see us in high definition you'll see those counters move across the board as if
I'm actually going to upgrade my my internet as soon as I leave the contract that I'm currently on. I'm going to go papal grade. I'm going to have like direct message to God. It's going to be awesome. So I'm a little bit behind you, another 6 months. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, good luck with that. So we'll see you all on Tuesday. Until then, anything else?
Not at all.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Martin. Take it easy.
Take care, all.
Cheers.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Martin. Are you frozen?